Welcome to the Hip Replacement Podcast. I'm Chris Bystriansky, your host. I've had both my hips replaced more than 10 years ago for one and more than 12 years ago for the other one. I've done some great things since then. I've done some Ironman triathlons, a lot of other endurance events. I've coached my daughter's athletic teams, and I'm here to share with you what I've learned over the last 10 or 12 years. Hopefully you'll find it helpful. And in this episode, I'm really excited to share, well, I don't know if I'm excited to tell you about these or excited to go through the experience, but I'm going to share with you the top 5 aches and pains I've had over the years and what I've done to address them. Because I suspect if I'm having them and I've had my hips replaced, maybe you've had these exact hip aches and pains or something similar to them. And maybe the way I handle mine will help you handle yours. Now, I'm certainly not a doctor. I can't stand a sight of blood, okay? And I'm not a physical therapist. So if you feel the need to go to a doctor or a physical therapist, by all means do so. I've done a lot of work with physical therapists over the years, especially in my initial recoveries. And I've just taken what I've learned from them, what I've learned from the doctors, and experimented on myself also with different exercises and stretches to address these different aches and pains I've had over the years. Okay, so let me set the stage here. All right, so you've had your surgery and you've either recovered, you felt pretty good, and years down the line, you've started to develop some aches and pains. Or maybe even in your initial recovery, you've plateaued, but you're still not feeling great. You know, you're like, I don't know, these hips don't feel good, my legs don't feel good, my back doesn't feel good. Something went wrong with the surgery, it's gotta be a problem with that, and I just don't know what to do. So I've been in something similar to these situations. I had a very long recovery. I did a lot of physical therapy, but in being so active and at times not being so active, these aches and pains have crept up. So if you're recovering and you're not getting to where you want to get to, or you've already recovered and you felt good and these aches and pains have come back in, that's where we are. Okay. So let's talk about them. The first thing, these are in no particular order, okay? So one doesn't hurt more than the other, and they're not in importance or timing or anything. But I took a long time to recover. I didn't take too long. And when I say recover, I mean the initial recovery. Some people, a month later, they're out running half marathons and things like that. I didn't do any of that. I was on walking assistance for about 6 weeks, and then I kind of took my time at the direction of the physical therapist and the doctor. Okay, so the aches and pains that I've experienced over the last 10, 12 years. The first thing, the front of my hips get very, very, very tight, and they ache. And the reason for this, from what I can tell, is that in being active, like moving forward, running, walking, golfing, riding a bike, anything, it compresses the front of the hip. And what it does, the muscles in the legs and the front of the hip. And what it does, it just feels like it's compressed and there's not enough space in my hips for the parts to move well. But the muscles in the front get tight and stiff. So, how do you address that? Well, in going through the physical therapy, I was taught, and I've certainly experimented with this and done this over the years, is that I stretch the front of my hips and the front of my legs, the quadriceps, and I strengthen the back. And what that does is it stretches the front. It makes the front muscles in my legs more elastic, and it tightens the back so it evens things out. So that's how I address aches and pains in the front of my hips, from just above my hips, going down through the joints, and into the muscles in my legs. And the muscles in my legs get tight just from my activity. But it also is from inactivity. So I'm sitting right here right now, and you may be sitting down, and I do my best not to sit down for too long in any given day. But if you're sitting around at your desk or in front of the TV or just in a chair all day, yeah, those front of those hips are going to get tight. The muscles are going to get tight. Now, it's important to note that I had the anterior approach to the surgery, meaning the surgeon went in through the front of my hips rather than the side or the back in the posterior approach. So maybe that makes an impact. I'm not sure, because both of mine were through the front. But if your front of your hips get tight or the front of your legs get tight and achy and you're not as flexible as you want to be, stretch the front, strengthen the back. And you can go on to Google and just Google, stretches for your hips for the front or strengthening the back, or check again with your physical therapist for some great stretches for those. And second thing, and this is probably the most painful one right here, the IT bands or the iliotibial bands, or the tendons that run the length of the side of your leg, basically from the knee up to the hip along the side. Okay, and this was, when it really hit me, it was kind of the pain creeping, and it hit me several years after surgery. The pain was so sharp on my IT bands that, and on one side in particular, that I thought I broke my leg. I thought I broke the bone or the femur in my leg, or I had done something to the hip implant because the pain was so sharp. And after talking with trainers and talking with a physical therapist, it was unanimous. They both said, hey, look, it sounds like you have a stretching issue and you're not doing enough to stretch that side of that part of your body. And at the time I was doing a lot of cycling. So the front of my legs and the side of my legs were getting a lot of work, and playing golf, and I was getting a lot of torque on my legs at that point. But the pain was so sharp, honestly, I thought I broke it. And I went in for x-rays, and the doctors said, there's a surgeon. I went back to the surgeon that I had the surgeries with, and he kind of laughed and said, no, this is nothing, just see the physical therapist again and they'll get you straightened out. So I did that. And yes, it was a stretching issue. I needed to stretch the IT bands on the side of my legs way more than I was already doing. And it was to compensate for all the stress and all the work I was doing with my legs as part of my cycling and walking and jogging and just in golfing. So I still do these things, because if I don't, that ache and that pain comes back in and it's super duper sharp. I actually have a knot. When it feels really bad, and when I say it feels really bad, I mean maybe 20 days a year. Okay. And in those 20 days a year, what leads up to that is me failing to stretch that part of my body appropriately for the amount of work or the amount of activity I'm putting on that side, or the amount of inactivity. One of the other reasons that I found causes that issue, the tightness in that IT band, was the type of chair that I was sitting in. And the chair was digging into the sides of my legs. Now, it was a pretty nice office chair. I didn't think anything of it, but once I started to stretch and that pain was still there, I realized that when I sat down, the chair was digging in. So I simply got rid of the chair. I mean, it's in a different part of my house. I did not throw it out. It's in a different part of my house. And what I do to solve that is that I rotate chairs about once a week. So I rotate about 3 different chairs. So I don't sit in anything for longer than about a week. And that seems to help out. So stretching, changing the chair so it's not digging in to my legs, those go a long way. So if you have that ache and that pain and that IT band on the side of your legs, stretch those things more. And maybe take a look at the chairs you're sitting in. Maybe it's the seat that you're sitting in your car, and you just need to adjust how you're sitting in there. So think about that. If you got that ache and pain, that's the way to do it. And again, you can go on to Google and look for ways to stretch the IT band. Athletes and runners stretch this all the time, all right? So there's plenty of videos out to do that. Or again, check with the physical therapist that you may have used in the past. Okay, now these next two kind of go hand in hand. So number 3 and number 4, again, in no particular order. So the hip, okay, I have one leg that's longer than the other following surgery. It's only about 4 millimeters, but it makes a difference. It feels like if I don't correct this leg length difference, it feels like my shorter leg is standing in a hole. All right. So I have a long leg and a short leg, 4 millimeters. Most people wouldn't even notice that. And maybe if you're born with like that and you grow up, your body grows like that with that much of a discrepancy, it kind of adjusts. But when you're abruptly have a leg length change, it's very noticeable. All right. So to fix that, I just use an extra shoe insert in my shorter leg. And I've had to experiment with different insoles over the years to find one that's about right and that's comfortable. So what happens if I do not correct this? The hip on my longer side will ache, and the knee on the shorter side starts to ache. And the way I think about this is that as you're walking, the gait, your walking stride, and your pace of walking is different because one of the legs is doing more work than the other, and it's putting different stress on different joints. So as you walk, as you're walking on that longer leg, as you're putting the weight down on that longer leg, you're getting a lot of pressure, more pressure on the longer hip. But then when you take that stride on the shorter leg, that knee on that shorter leg is doing a lot of work, and it may not be rotating correctly, okay? So the gait may cause a problem. It was certainly causing it for me. And if I do not adjust this, the hip on my longer side starts to ache, and the knee on my shorter side starts to ache. So if I've adjusted this with insoles in my shoes, why would this even come up? A couple different reasons. Number one, a lot of times if I'm out by the pool or if I'm at a beach or if I'm just walking around the house, I'll do that in bare feet. And obviously it's not corrected at that point. Or if the insole that I have been using gets worn out, or the shoes that I have change and it's not corrected appropriately, that's when it shows up. So I get that ache in the longer hip and in a shorter knee. So if you're feeling that at all, think about maybe your leg length isn't corrected appropriately. Again, check with the surgeon or physical therapist on ways to, number one, measure that, and number two, if that's an appropriate fix for you. And how did I even figure out that I had a long leg and a short leg? Well, number one, when I stood up after my second surgery, when I stood up out of the bed the afternoon of my second surgery and I put my feet down, it felt like I was standing in a hole. I felt like I was crooked like this a little bit because my left side was in a hole, okay? Now, some people have a much longer length discrepancy, and that may need more of a correction. But for my purposes, and maybe for yours as well, a shoe insert would fix that. And I also have different flip-flops. So when I'm at beach or the pool, I would generally use 2 different flip-flops. They look the same, but they're actually different heights. And I had to buy 2 separate flip-flop, 2 different sets of flip-flops, and just basically throw in the closet the one I wasn't using. Now, I know there are companies out there that make shoes that have different insoles for this very purpose. I have not used any one of those just yet as of the recording of this podcast episode. So longer hip, the hip on the longer side and the knee on the shorter side. Okay. get those leg lengths straightened out, and hopefully that goes away with a little stretching to loosen up those hips and the knee. Okay, the last one is really the most recent one, and it's the heel on the ankle and the heel on the shorter side, and again on the shorter leg. And again, what I think this is the different gait that I'm walking with, and the ankle not rotating the right way. So my fix for this is simply to do some more stretching, and both rotational and working all the muscles around the legs. And I've noticed that I'm usually pretty good about stretching and doing something every day, but if I don't do enough, that's when these aches and pains start to creep in and I'm really feeling them. But I'm essentially, through my own actions, I'm able to control the aches and pains that I do feel, because I've taken so much time and worked with physical therapists early on in the process, and I've taken so much time to basically experiment. All right, I've got this ache and pain. If I do this, if I stretch this way, if I do this activity, does that fix it? Does that make it feel better? And it does. And it's been so long, 10 years past one leg and 12 years past the other hip, that I've been able to experiment. Okay, if I leave it alone, does it get better by itself, or does it get worse? And if I leave it alone, it gets worse. If I do the stretches that I'm supposed to do, that I've been taught through physical therapy and that I've learned over the years, it gets better. So I feel like I have control over the aches and pains. Hopefully you've been able to work with a physical therapist throughout your recovery, throughout your initial recovery, and that you continue to do some of the exercises to really alleviate some of these aches and pains, or that you can fall back to those. And I try to do something every day and be active just to stem these things off so that I can live a very active lifestyle in the most pain-free way possible. So I hope this is helpful. Again, the aches and pains, the front of the hips, the IT bands, the hip on the longer side, the knee on the shorter side, and the heel on the shorter side. All of these things have come up over the last 10, 12 years, and it's my belief that I can prevent these with my stretches and exercises. Now, a lot of these things you can go onto YouTube or Google and find exercises to do to address these. But I would certainly check, if you have that capability, I would certainly check with your physical therapist that you've used or your surgeon on what they recommend to address these aches and pains. Now, I put this video together because I didn't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting to where I want to get to in my recovery, or I was doing fine and now I have these aches and pains and they don't go away, and oh my gosh, is there something wrong with my hip? Well, probably not. I mean, it could be something wrong with the hip, but maybe not. And maybe it's just a little matter of, number one, knowing where it's coming from, and number two, doing some stretches and exercises that address the muscles that run into or impact that specific ache and pain that you have. Now, I talked a lot about these different joints and things that I do. I also use some tools, and next episode, I will go into the tools that I use and into some of the stretches that I do to address these aches and pains. Now, again, I'm not a physical therapist, so check with your own physical therapist on what you should be doing to control these things. But next episode, I'll go into details about the tools that I use to help address some of these aches and pains. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you get something out of it. I hope it helps you to alleviate some of the things that concern you, and you realize that you're not unusual, you're not strange, you're not alone. These aches and pains do come up. So there you go. I want this to be helpful. And again, thank you so much for tuning into the Hip Replacement Podcast. And until next time, I wish you the best recovery possible. Take care.